I was sitting in the waiting room of a prenatal clinic with a paper cup of water shaking in my hands when I realized I had memorized the sound of my husband lying. The chairs were lined up against the wall, gray plastic, slightly sticky, and a TV in the corner played something cheerful without sound. A woman across from me rubbed her belly and smiled at her phone. I stared at the floor tiles and thought about how strange it was that fear could feel so quiet, like it didn't need to announce itself anymore. That morning, my phone had buzzed while I was pulling on my coat. I hadn't even checked the notification right away. It was one of those days when your body feels heavier than usual, when every movement reminds you that something inside you depends on you staying upright and calm. I assumed it was another reminder email from the clinic, or maybe my sister asking how I was feeling. It was neither. It was a message from my cousin Leah, sent without any greeting, just a sentence that didn't belong in my life. She wrote that she didn't know if she should tell me this, but she felt sick keeping it to herself. And then she asked if everything was okay between me and Daniel. Daniel was my husband. I remember reading her name first, then the word sick, then his name, and feeling my stomach tighten in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. I told her yes, everything was fine, because that was the reflex I had trained myself into, the automatic defense of a life I believed in. She didn't answer right away. When she did, she sent a long message, too long for comfort, too careful in its wording. She told me that during a family gathering a few months earlier, before I had started showing, Daniel had been quiet at first, then had started talking after a few drinks. She said he had asked people what they would do if they weren't sure they wanted to be a father yet. I read that line again and again. Weren't sure they wanted to be a father yet. Leah said he had asked if it was selfish to stay in a marriage just because of a baby, if it was worse to leave early, or to stay and resent everyone later. She said some people laughed awkwardly, others tried to reassure him, and one aunt told him that babies change everything. Leah said he nodded a lot, like he was taking notes. I remember standing by the door, coat half on, one hand on my belly, the other holding my phone, and thinking that I must have misunderstood. Daniel had been the one who wanted kids first. He had talked about names, about schools, about how he would teach our child to ride a bike. When I got pregnant, he hugged me for a long time and said we were ready. I told myself that Leah must be exaggerating, that maybe he had just been anxious, that men panic sometimes, and that panic didn't mean intent. I told myself a lot of things very quickly, because that's what you do when the alternative feels too large to look at directly. At the clinic, my name was called. I stood up, walked down the hallway, lay on the paper-covered bed, and smiled at the nurse like nothing in the world had shifted. I listened to the heartbeat, steady and strong, and felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not all at once, but enough that I knew it wouldn't go back the way it was. When I got home, Daniel was already there. He asked how the appointment went, kissed my cheek, took my coat. His voice was normal, his face relaxed, the same face I had shared a bed with for years. I watched him move around the apartment and felt like I was watching someone perform a role he had practiced well. That night, I didn't confront him. I told myself I needed more information, more certainty, because accusing someone based on a single message felt reckless. Instead, I listened. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things I hadn't noticed before, or maybe things I had chosen not to see. The way he paused before answering questions about the future, the way he changed the subject when I talked about after the baby was born, the way he took phone calls in the other room more often than he used to. One evening, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't planning to touch it. I truly wasn't. But I saw my mother-in-law's name on the screen, and beneath it, a preview of a message that said, "I just want you to be sure before it's too late." I sat down on the bed slowly, like if I moved too fast something would break beyond repair. I picked up the phone. I knew his passcode. He had never hidden it from me, because he had never needed to. I opened the message thread. What I saw wasn't a single conversation. It was weeks of them. Messages between him and his mother, his brother, a close friend from work, even his cousin. Different people, same topic. My pregnancy. Our marriage. Whether he was making a mistake. He asked them if staying would ruin his life. He asked if leaving now would be easier than leaving later. He asked if it was possible to love a child, and still regret the family that child came from. He asked these questions while I was throwing up in the mornings, while I was lying awake at night with my hands on my stomach, while I was rearranging my body and my future around something I thought we were doing together. None of the messages were cruel in a dramatic way. That almost made it worse. There were no insults, no anger, no obvious villain lines. Just doubt, careful wording, a man weighing options like he was comparing job offers, not lives. One message from his brother stood out. It said, "You don't have to decide now, just don't tell her until you know for sure." I put the phone back exactly where it had been and went into the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at the wall, trying to breathe normally. I remember thinking that I couldn't scream even if I wanted to, because the baby would feel it, and the idea that my own emotions could harm something innocent made me feel trapped inside my own chest. When Daniel came out, wrapped in a towel, he smiled at me and asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. My voice sounded steady. That scared me more than if it had broken. That night, lying next to him, I felt like there was an invisible line between us. I wanted to ask him everything, to demand an explanation, to force the truth into the open. But I was afraid of what would happen once it was said out loud. Because once someone admits they are unsure if you are worth staying for, you can't unhear it. So, I waited. And in that waiting, something inside me began to change, quietly, deliberately, like a door closing without being slammed. I started noticing how often he said my name after that, like he was checking that I was still there. Daniel would come into the room, pause, and say my name softly, almost casually, and when I answered, he relaxed. It was subtle, easy to miss, but once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. It felt like he was taking attendance in a life he hadn't fully committed to yet. I kept pretending. I cooked dinner, folded his shirts, talked about baby clothes and appointments. I let him touch my stomach and smile when the baby kicked. I nodded when he talked about work stress and money, and being tired. I played my part well, because part of me wanted to see how far he would go, how long he would live inside this double life, where he could be both present and undecided. Inside, I was splitting into two versions of myself. One was the woman he saw, calm, careful, still believing in the idea of us. The other was quieter, observant, slowly grieving something that wasn't officially dead yet. I began to remember things differently. Moments from earlier in my pregnancy replayed with a new weight. The night I cried because I felt overwhelmed and he said, maybe we should slow down talking about the future so much. The way he hesitated before telling his friends the news. The fact that he never posted anything about the pregnancy, not once, even though he used to share everything. I wondered how many decisions he had made alone while I was building a child inside me. The breaking point didn't come in a dramatic argument or a confrontation. It came on a Sunday afternoon at his parents' house. We were sitting in the living room, his mother offering me tea, his father watching television, everything normal on the surface. I went to the bathroom, and as I walked back down the hallway, I heard my name. Daniel's voice was low. His mother's was softer. I wasn't trying to listen, but when you hear your own name, your body reacts before your mind does. She said she just wanted him to be happy, that it was better to be honest with himself than to force something that would turn into resentment. She said a child deserves stability, not obligation. He didn't argue. He said he didn't know what the right thing was anymore. He said he felt trapped by expectations. He said he was scared of waking up one day and realizing he had ruined his life by staying. I stood there, unseen, one hand on the wall, the other on my stomach, and understood something with absolute clarity. He wasn't confused. He was undecided, because undecided kept all options open. That night after we got home, I asked him if he was happy, just that. No accusations, no raised voice. He hesitated for half a second too long. He said he was trying to be. That was when something in me went very still. I didn't confront him about the messages. I didn't repeat his words back to him. I simply told him that I knew he had been talking to other people about whether he wanted this family, and that I knew he had been doing it behind my back. His face changed in a way I will never forget. Not anger, not even guilt at first, but fear. The fear of being seen fully, without control over the narrative. He tried to explain. He said he needed advice. He said he was overwhelmed. He said it didn't mean he didn't love me. He said he never planned to leave. He just needed time to process. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I asked him one question. I asked him if there had been a moment, even briefly, when he imagined a future where me and the baby were not in it. He didn't answer right away. That silence was the answer. I slept in the guest room that night. Not because I was angry, but because I needed to feel what it was like to choose myself without explaining it. Over the next few days, he became attentive in a way that felt desperate. He cooked, cleaned, apologized, promised therapy, promised effort, promised certainty. He said he chose us. Said it more than once, like repetition could erase the past months of doubt. But something had shifted permanently. I realized that while he was deciding whether he wanted to be a husband and a father, I had been deciding whether I could trust someone who treated my life as a variable. And my decision had been forming quietly, long before he noticed. I didn't leave right away. I gave birth months later. He was there. He cried. He held our child. He looked real in his love. And that was the most confusing part of all. But love after doubt is different. It carries memory. It carries caution. I stayed, but not in the way I used to. I became someone who kept her own counsel, who built inner stability independent of his choices. I learned how to prepare for possibilities without panic, how to protect myself emotionally while still caring for my child. Sometimes, late at night, I would look at him sleeping and think about how close he came to walking away without ever telling me the truth. Not because he was cruel, but because he believed he was entitled to decide alone. We are still together. People assume that means the story had a happy ending. What they don't see is that something ended the moment I realized my pregnancy had been debated like a hypothetical. And something else was born in its place. Not forgiveness, not resentment, awareness.